Boker or Masechet Gittin Daf Membet Amud Aleph 42a1. We were just speaking about that it's an eved of two shutafin, and if we're talking about an eved of two shutafin, and one of them completely frees his 100% portion, his 100% portion. Sorry. So therefore, what happens is that it becomes this eved becomes half chorim and half eved, meaning that he becomes half, right? Before we were speaking about, does it help to come and free half of a slave if you own 100% of the slave? There we said maybe not. But if you only own the 50% and you're freeing up your full 50%, that for sure works. And therefore the slave now becomes half eved and half ben chorim. Okay? Amar Rabba. Rabba says, Machloket b'sheshichrer chetzio v'niach chetzio. The machloket is only if you freed half of him and you left half of him with you. Aval shichrer chetzio. But if you freed half of him, umachar chetzio, and you sold half of him, onatam matana chetzio, once entire possession of the eved came away from you, meaning you're not the owner anymore of the eved. Divrei akol, according to everybody, kana. The eved acquires is half shichrur, meaning basically it's a concept. By the way, you should know this if you remember. I said this yesterday to do with the concept of woman. You cannot come and tell a woman, you know what, you're half free. What does it mean? One night you're by me, one night you can go with whoever you want. It doesn't work. It's either you're 100% all or none. It's either 100% in or 100% out. Oto davar eved. An eved is either 100% in or 100%. I cannot free half of a slave, but I could free half and sell half, or free half and give away half. Because once I did that, 100% of him went away from me. Or when there's two partners, because I own 50%, you own 50%. When I free the 50%, it's 100% mine that I freed up. So for he has nothing to do with me anymore. There's no connection. There's nothing grabbing on. There's no strings attached.
So you cannot do that. You cannot sell 50%.
Well, no. You could sell 50 and free 50. That you could do because then 100% is away from you. Or if I only had 50 and you have 50, I could free my 50 because my 50% is my 100%. Okay? Exactly, but my 100% I give away. Okay, I freed him. So Elmaleh, Rabbi comes and he asks the following question: Uvekulo lo plige. What? They're not going to argue if you're going to come, you're going to completely free him. Imagine right now you come, you write your properties to the two different slaves. Kanu, they both acquire each other, right? And they acquire themselves. So each one frees each other. Another one taught how imagine a person comes and he writes down in a shtar that all his properties go to ploni servants. They didn't even acquire themselves then. So my love, this is not the machlok between Rabbi and Rabbanan, that according to Rabbi, he's saying that it does help even on half of the freedom, and according to Rabbanan, it does not help. And so the Gemara, no. The entire Braita is Rabbanan. The first Braita was teaching us that it helps on the half of the Avadim, is talking about where he wrote down Kol nechasai netunim ploni avdai. What does that mean? Since he came and he took them completely free, because half of each one was given to the other eved. So the rabbis hold that the shichrur helps, right? But it was only on chetziam, right? So he says, but the other one is chetzi, which means that he comes and he says it doesn't help the freeing if we're talking about a case where he says half of my properties are going to be given to you, right? Because since, right, bechol shtar lo shichrer ela chetzi me'eved, only half of the eved, and the other chetzi, right, he left it over for himself. The rabbis hold that it does not help the shichrur. So now the seifa is going to come and teach us. If they said half and half, it does not help. So it's mashma that the Reisha was talking about. He said that the entire eved is going to be free. So he says, Parushe kamefarish. It's coming to explain that they didn't even acquire themselves. That's also logical to say such a thing. The Isa Kadai was if you're going to tell me the Reisha, the Amar Kulo, the Reisha is talking about that it was the entire thing. Okay? The Reisha is talking about the entire thing. Hashta Amar Kulo Kanu, if you're going to tell me the entire thing, Kol Nechasai, and they still didn't acquire it. If he says Chetzi, you're going to tell me that they acquired it? So says the Gemara, Mishumha lo Idia. If it's going to be because of that, we didn't speak about that. Tana Seifa Legaluya Reisha, the Sefer was coming to reveal the Reisha, Shelot Tomar Reisha Damar Chetzi Chetzi. We're not talking about the Reisha that he said half. Aval Amar Kulo, but if he said the entire thing, Kanu, they did acquire it. Tana Sefer Damar Chetzi Chetzi, Miklad the Reisha, right, Damar Kulo, Vafilo Achilo Kanu. And they still didn't acquire it. Ibaitem, for one you could answer. Lakash Hasana question. Kan b'shtar echad, kan mishne shtarot. Here we're talking about one shtar or two different documents. Meaning if it's going to be one document, right? He's coming and he wrote to both documents in one, meaning both slaves, he wrote it in the same document. So for the shichrur, right, does not help because of the din shtar shichrur that you cannot free two slaves with one letter. But if he wrote it in two different letters, so then it helps that each one was considered like a free document, like a letter of a emancipation letter, a letter of freedom for each one of them. Okay, so it says the Gemara, Bishtar echad ma'idya. Why do I care about one document? Chetzi that he says half. Afilu amar kulo nami lo kanu. So even if he said the entire thing, it doesn't help because it was only one document. So it says the Gemara, Haki nami kamar. You're right. This is what it means to say. Apatzman lo kanu. What does it mean that they didn't acquire themselves? But one of these words, Bishtar echad, with one shtar. Aval bishne shtarot, but with two different documents, kanu, they do acquire themselves. The mamar chetzi, but if he said chetzi, even with two documents, they didn't acquire themselves. But you cannot acquire a half. You have to acquire 100%. You cannot acquire half a slave. Right? That means he cannot acquire himself. Because he has to acquire himself with 100%. He cannot acquire himself with a half. If you can answer like a question, kan bevatachat, kan bezeh. It all depends. How did it happen? Did it happen in one shot? Right? And therefore it does help. Or was it bezeh achar zeh? What does it mean bezeh achar zeh? Like when I was explaining, right, that if it's going to be one after another, so then it's two different halachot. So bishlema batra lokani. I understand that at the end, right, we're talking about that you're not going to acquire it, right? So he comes and he says, right, bishlema batra lokani. I understand the last one is not going to acquire it, the kana lekama, because the first one acquired it. But if you're going to tell me now, right, so that the first one should acquire it in the other one. So he says, but rather it's like what we said at the beginning. Okay? Fine. Ravashi says, Shane Hatam, it's different over there. The Kakari Lehu Avadai. What does that mean? He called him my servant. So the fact that he said Avadai, it's a completely different halacha because he says, Kol Nechasim Tulim Plonim Avadai. What does it mean Avadai? This is mashma that he doesn't want to free them. Because if he freed them, they're not Avadai anymore. They're not my slaves anymore. That's it. They're free men. So why did he call them Avadai? Avadai zotomeret, Shemadayin Avadim Shelo. They're still his slaves. So therefore it doesn't free them. Amarle Rafram, right? Bar Papa, right? He comes and he says, right, like this. Amarle Rafram the Ravashi, says Rafram to Ravashi, the Dilma Avadai Shayu Kvar. Maybe Avadai means Avadai that they were already there, right? That means they were already his slaves, not that they're still his slaves. Meaning Avadai Bavar, my slaves in the past, but now they're not his slaves anymore. Milo Tran, didn't we learn in the Mishnah? Hakotev kol nechasav leavdo. If you write all your properties to your friend, yatzal lecherut, you go out free. Shier karka kol shu. But if you left even one little tiny part, right? That means imagine you right now you come and you write all your properties to your slave. He goes out free. If you left one little tiny piece, lo yatzal lecherut. He doesn't go out free. Rabbi Shimon says lo lam ben cholin. You always go. He always goes out free. At Shoman until he says kol nechazan until pulling avdi chutz mecham riboshen, and except for 1 in 10,000. So Tama, the reasoning is because he said chutz mecham riboshen. But if he didn't say that, he does acquire them. So he says, right? He comes and he says like this. So he says, right? Amai, why? Va'eved kakarule. He called it an eved. Ela avdi shaya kvar. Rather, it was an eved that it was already there. Hachanami, so to hear vadai shaya kvar. Right? My slave that it was already. So nigacho shor. Right? Imagine right now that a shor comes and he's going to gore a chetzi avil chetzi ben chorin b'yom rabo, on the day that it belongs to the master. So l'rabo, yom shel atzmo la'atzmo. You understand what happened? One more time. You have an eved, chetzi eved, chetzi ben chorin, half a slave. So one day he works by me, one day he works for himself, because he's half free. If he gets damaged by a shor, by an ox, so if it was on my day, I get all the money, all the damages, and it's my eved, I get everything. If it's on his day, he gets everything. Make sense? Yeah? אלא מעתה יום של רבו יישא שפחה ויום של עצמו יישא בת חולים. Ask the Gemara, I don't understand you. So now 1 second. On his own day, he could be married to a regular woman, and on the day that he's working for me, he gets married to a shifcha. Kilo, that's how you're working? Meaning like you're splitting up the body? That means, what are you saying? So, you know, on the day that he's an Eved, so he could get married to a shifcha. And the day that he's a free man, he should be, you know, with a thing. What's going on here? Right? לא, ודאי שלא. אתה לא יכול להפוך את אשתו לחצי חצי. היא בת חולים לגמרי. איך אתה עושה? So now he comes and he says, so now what? You're going to tell me that each day he's going to get married to somebody else? Isur or lo coming? So the Gemara said, no, that's already Isur. Isur, you can't play around with Isur that today he could get married to a shivcha and tomorrow he's getting married to a bat chorim. But that's prohibitions. But to do with money, yeah, today is my money and tomorrow is your money. Let's say we're partners. So it depends on when it happened. Today is my money, tomorrow he's your money. So Tashima, we're going to try to bring another proof. Hemit, noten chetzi knas lerabo. Imagine right now he comes and somebody killed, right? Chetzio ben cholim. So they have to give half of the kofer to his master. The chetzi kofer to his yershav, to his inheritors, right? Kofer is the value of the person. Do you know that there's such a thing, right? For example, do you know there's insurances that they come and they say, okay, fine. If a person loses a hand in an accident, so there's a value to the hand. If a person loses an arm, there's a value to the arm. If a person dies, there's a certain value, right? What does it mean, a certain value? The insurance will come and automatically, a person lost his life, here's the money, right? There's no, you have to fight. No. Okay, insurance is you always have to fight. But Hakavana is that there's a value that if the insurance already has to pay, this is the value that they have to pay.
It's the same with photographers. They insure their hands.
Exactly. Right. So each thing is like a different insurance. So therefore, there's something which is called kofer. Kofer is like a value of the amount of the person. So, for example, if an Eved was killed, right? If an Eved was killed, he has a value. So, for example, why? Because he was my Eved. So, if a person comes and kills an Eved, he has to come and pay me that value. So whatever the value was. So now here, technically, this Eved was half my slave and half free. So they only give me half and they give half to the inheritors. That's what they have to do. Says the Gemara, Abai, why? Hachanami, say the same name. Lema, why don't you just say, depends which day it was. Yom shel Rabo, everything should go to Rabo. Yom shel Atzmo, everything should go to Atzmo. So says the Gemara, Shanehacha, it's different over there. The Kakalia Karna. Right? In such a case, the Keren already left, which means he already lost everything else. So says the Gemara, Ve'ela hechi dami de la kakalia karna. So he says, so then what's the case then that he didn't, so he says, Kedon sheikau al yado, that he hit him on his hand, v'tzamta yado, and it dried up, v'sofa lachzor, right? And at the end, it's going to become freed up again. It's going, meaning that the guy's hand dried up and everything, but afterwards it's going to become healthy again. So Hani Chalabaya, understand according to Abaya Damar that he says Noten lo shevet gdala v'shevet ktana, that you give him shevet gdola, which means money that the fact of the hand became dried up right now, like as a nezek. The shevet ktana, shevet is that which he's going to lose in the fact of what we're talking about, the time that he was sick because of the makkah. Remember that when a person comes and he damages somebody else, he has to pay 5 damages. Damage, embarrassment, doctor's bills, unemployment, right? I'm forgetting one. There's one more, right? But basically, so the damages, Bosha is embarrassment. I said that, right? I said damages, embarrassment, doctor's bills, meaning refuah, right? Ripui.
Value on the market.
The unemployment, shevet. I'm missing one, but okay, fine.
Value on the market. There's not something like that. The pain.
1 minute. Let me see here.
And taxes.
Yeah.
The pain, yeah?
The pain. Now he comes and he says, right, Shapir makes sense, but according to Rava, that he's going to come and he says, I don't tell him Shifto B'Chol Yom Yom, which means he's going to give him what he loses every single day, right? So here, there's no nezek at all. Why? Because at the end of the day, he's going to become healthy again. So therefore, Hay Shorhu, V'Shor, 1 second, it's a shor. A shor only pays nezek. He doesn't pay shevet. Meaning a human being that damages has to pay these damages. An animal that damages only pays damages. An animal does not pay for your embarrassment. He doesn't pay for your unemployment. He doesn't pay. He just pays damages. It's all that he pays. So says the Gemara, if you can answer, Adam, it was a human being that hit him, and that's why you were talking about this. If you can answer, memrahi. This is a memra. Memra lerava lo svirale. And a memra for Rava, he doesn't hold on this. So we're going to ask the following question: Meukav get shichrur, right? When we're talking about now, Meukav get shichrur, right? Which is basically an eved that he didn't get the get shichrur, right? But ki'ilu, he's just lacking that. So yesh lo knas or no knas? Does he have a knas or not? So kesef sheloshim shekalim iten ladonav. It's written in the Torah that you have to give 30 shekalim to the master, meaning the value of an eved is 30 shekalim. Somebody kills your eved, he has to pay you sheloshim shekalim. Okay, so amanachmana v'hai lavadonu. So here he's not his master. Or maybe give him a get shichrur. Maybe since he's lacking the get shichrur, adon karinebe, you still call him an adon. So Tashema, we're going to try to bring a proof. If they came and they killed, they have to give chetzi kras lelabo v'chetzi kofel yoshav, half the kras to Rabbo and half of the kofel to yoshav. My love, are we not talking about now Mishnah Charona, like Mishnah Charona? Says no. Mishnah Rishona. This is like the first psak, not like the second psak. Mishnah Charona is many times that sometimes, for example, I say A, and then I retract, I say B. So the A was called Mishnah Rishona, the first version of what I paskin. This B is Mishnah Charona, the last version of what I paskin. Sometimes you have that, like Stirot, for example, even in Rav Ovadia Yosef. You'll have that Rav Ovadia said something in one book, and then all of a sudden another book, he said a little bit different. Right? It could be that even if he added a Machmir to Ola Brachat, doesn't matter what it is. But the second that he said that in a book later on, it's called a Mishnah Charona, meaning that's what's called the later book. So later book, this is what he was paskin. Okay? So Tashima, we're going to try to bring a proof. He pile chino, is what David said before. What happens if he took out his tooth? He took out his eye. It's Yotze B'Shinui. So he said, sorry, Yotze B'Shinui, not in the meno. So what happens if he took out both? He went to his Eved Kenani, he punched him out in his face, right? So at the same time, one punch, he took out his tooth, and another punch, he took out his eye. Right, so what happens? He goes out free because of his tooth, and he has to pay him because of his eye. Meaning, if it was each one, he goes out free. He goes out free because of his eye, or he goes out free because of his tooth. But the fact that he did both, he goes out free because of the tooth, because the tooth was first, and then he has to pay him for the eye. That's what happens. Okay? So, if you're going to tell me, yesh lo knas, there is a knas, and it goes to the master. If it would have been somebody else, they give it to the master. So if the master himself did it, he's going to give it to him. So says the Gemara, maybe it's like the mandamar that says, we don't do that. The Tanya was, we learned in the Braita, Bekulan, right? In all the 24 Rashi Evarim, Eved Yotze Ben Lecherut, an Eved is going to go out free. It's really get Shichrur Merabo, and you need to get Shichrur from the master. These are the words of Rishman. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, you don't need this. Rabbi Lazar Omer, Rabbi Lazar says, Tzarich. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Tzarich. Rabbi Tarfon says, you don't need it. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Tzarich, HaMachriim, Ifnei Chachamim, the ones which are Machriim. Which ones, whether they say, Nidim Divrei Rabbi Tarfon, B'Shem Ga'aim. Oil v'Torah zikta lo. But Divrei Rabbi Kiva, L'shar Evarim. Which means this. They want to make a compromise. So the ones which are Machriim Divrei Chachamim, which means that they come and they make like a compromise. In the words of the rabbis, they come and say like this. To do with Mina Torah, it's Shen V'Ayin. So we agree with, right, Rabbi Tarfon, that he needs a get, that he doesn't even need a get shichrur, because to do a Shen V'Ayin, since the Torah told him that he's a free man, he doesn't need to do anything. But we hold like Rabbi Akiva, right, that you do need to get shichrur with other membranes of the body, with other organs of the body. Why? Because since it's a knas of the chachamim, that if you come, like this, if you come and you right now you took out his arm, so the Torah didn't say anything about the arm. The Torah said, it says shen va'ayin. It didn't speak about the arm. So if you took off now the arm, so you're right. The rabbis came and they said knas. He has to go free now. But it was only the rabbis that said it. It wasn't in the Torah. So therefore here you need to get shichrur, because it was only done by the rabbis and it wasn't from the Torah. So says the Gemara, knas? Why is it a knas? It's from the Torah also. He says, no, but it's a midrash hachamim. Meaning it's only midrash, it's not like a real thing. Okay, meaning what do you mean real thing? Meaning that it's not mifurash in the Torah, it's a midrash hachamim. So that's why they said. We're going to ask one question. Mu'ukav get shichrur. Ochel bitruma or eno ochel bitruma? If somebody is going to be mu'ukav get shichrur, does he eat truma or not? So kinyan kaspo marachmana. Do we say kinyan kaspo? If I love kinyan kaspo, when it's not kinyan kaspo, or dilnar maybe given the mechusar get shichrur, maybe since he's lacking get shichrur, kinyan kaspo karyambe. We do call it kinyan kaspo. So Tashema, we're going to bring a proof to Amar of Mashashia. Says Mashashia, Kohenet Shenitarev Vlada Bivlad Shivchata. When you have a Kohenet that was mixed up the child with the Vlad Shivchata, Hareyelu Uchrim Mituma. So they're going to eat Truma. Vecholkin Chelek Echad al Goren. They're going to come and they're going to divide it, meaning like this. You have a Kohenet, her child was mixed up with the Vlad of her maidservant. So they were both pregnant, they both gave birth, and all of a sudden they say, oh, 1 second, who's the master and who's the slave? The babies got mixed up. Imagine. Right? So nowadays you start asking, you have paternal test, DNA test, this, that, fine. But technically speaking, what do you do nowadays? Yeah? So he says they're both allowed to eat Truma, because why? Because whether he's an Eved or he's a Kohen, the Eved belonged to the Kohen. So whether it's the Eved or the Kohen, we're both able to eat Truma. So they can both eat Truma, right? But they only get one portion when they go to receive Truma. Because only the Kohen receives a portion of Truma, not the Eved. So when they go to the granary, they could only receive one portion together, but they could both eat Truma. Higdilu atarovot, once they get older, right? So now what happens? They free each other, right? Why? Because now one of them is going to be free, one of them is not. And now what happens is that now that's it. So Asha says the Gemara, can you compare both cases? He says, if Eliyahu Navi comes and he says, this is the Eved, so he's his money, right? But over here, it's not his money at all. Why? Because he can't subjugate him, he can't do anything to him. So says the Gemara, so let's ask another question. Imagine right now the Eved comes and he sells, right, the slave only to do with knas. Machur or eno machur? Is he sold or not? Which means like this. Imagine right now you take an insurance policy on your Eved. Yeah? And now you come and you sell that insurance policy to somebody else. Meaning I come to David and I say, listen, David, if somebody kills this Eved, you get the money. You get the policy. So you sold it just for the knas. So he says, is it sold or is it not sold? That's the question. Yeah? Is it sold or not sold?
Why would they not be sold? People sell
so says the Gemara, this is a question whether in Shitat Rabbi Min or Rabbanan. Why? It's a question according to Rabbi Min. When does Rabbi Min says that a person could be makneh davar shel olam? Because it's, for example, the fruits to a tree that for sure they're going to come. But over here, who's ever going to say that he's going to get this money? Okay, we were talking about again. I said it, but just let me make it clear. I'm not talking about this because usually nowadays life insurance means that if they die, and it doesn't matter how they die. Here, it's not dying in any form. It's dying with a shore coming and goring it. That's when they get some money. Meaning it has to be like an accidental death, not a death of a natural death. Meaning if David came and lived until 80 and then he died, nobody gets money. So it's not the same thing.
Not the same probability.
Right? Exactly. So therefore here, when does Rabbi Ni say you can be makneh davar shel olam? Fruits to a tree. Is the tree going to give a fruits? Well, it gave up fruits yesterday, meaning in last year. Why wouldn't it give it to next year? So yeah, it's going to give it off. But here, whoever said that an ox is going to come and gore it, and you're going to get the money. Nobody said that. So maybe it's not going to come at all. Right? But even things are never going to say that it is going to be. Mind the Shalom. Whoever said that he's going to have to come and actually pay the knas. Okay? So Dilma Model Miftar, maybe the guy's going to come and he's going to be patur the knas. Remember that by Jewish law is very different than secular law. Imagine right now you come to the police and you say, listen, I just ran a red light. Right? If they're a nice guy, maybe he'll come in and say, you know what? Don't do it again. But technically speaking, he could give you a knas, he could still give you a ticket. And then if you go to court, they're going to say, well, you admitted to it. By Jewish law, modeh b'knas is patur. What does it mean? If you come and voluntarily, before getting accused, you come and voluntarily, you accuse yourself and say that I did this, you're patur. You're exempt. Yeah, that's called your exempt. So then that's what it's saying. So basically, you come to patur.